Hey YouTube, Sir Lich here. Today I'm going to talk a bit more about my Echo NPC tool, and we're going to do some examples. Before that though, I want to explain how the tool works, just so we're all on the same page. So it takes a custom template, that's this stuff, and turns it into entities and animation controllers, which can be added to any world. It has three parts. We don't actually care about the header, that just has settings information. The entity is a normal behavior pack entity. So all the pieces that you're used to still applies. Components, component groups, events, all that good stuff. The custom part, which I add, is this states definition, which is currently blank, but this is where you put the custom code that creates the NPCs. When you're finished, you simply compile it, and the entity and animation controller will be added directly into your world. Okay, so I've compiled the script and jumped into game, and I also gave our behavior pack a default resource pack to work with. So this is a player model and a skin that I found online. And of course he doesn't do anything. We haven't provided any state information yet, so yeah, he doesn't do much yet. We're back in the editor, and we're going to create our first NPC. So this is about the simplest entity that you can create. You have to provide a state name, and you can provide a list of dialogue options. If we compile this, we can see how this looks in game. I've recompiled the template, and I'm back in the world. I also gave our NPC a name tag, so it's easier to read. The default behavior is that clicking the entity will move to the next state. I'm calling that a transition. Once we run out of dialogue, the entity will go back to having no interactions. I personally think it's a little bit boring that after we run out of dialogue, our entity won't speak to us any longer. Let's fix that. So we've added a transition to our first state, and this says that when we reach the end of the dialogue, that we'll transition to the loop state. The loop state contains additional dialogues, and we're also going to create a transition here. In our case, we want it to point to loop. This simply means that when loop reaches the end of its dialogue, it will loop back to the beginning and play itself again. Okay, I'm back in world. Let's see what kind of changes this had. As we can see, after we run out of the main dialogue, the dialogue will change to loop, at which point it will loop infinitely, repeating the same nonsensical dialogue. Our NPC is a bit boring. Let's change that. Okay, so what we've done is add component information to our NPC. The way that you can read this is underneath the components dictionary, there is a list of arguments which show which state these components should be applied to. So in this case, the first state will receive the Minecraft scale component. Whoa, what's happened here? Well, the first state now receives the scale component. After we click forward in the dialogue, we're going to see that he shrinks back down to his normal size. The big NPC was a pretty cool effect, but let's bring it one step further. So, I've reworked the dialogue here to be a little bit harsher. It's, get away from me. I said leave. You'll regret it. Die. So I want to make an effect here that really encourages the player to leave the NPC alone. That is done with commands. So this says that the fourth state, in this case the die dialogue, should play the command /summon lightning bolt. Let's see how it looks in world. So what does that look like? Pretty exciting, huh? let's talk about transitions. Echo NPC assumes that if you don't define any transitions, that you want to click on the entity to move from state to state. But we can also include some more complicated transition code. Let's see what that would look like. So I've added a new transition types dictionary. This follows the format of the rest of the groups. So this means that the first state will use a proximity transition. The rest of the states will still default to clicking. So I'm back in world, and the entity should speak to me when I get within 5 blocks. What's happening? Well, I built a convenience method into Echo NPC that disables proximity sensors by default. This is because it is very annoying as a developer to accidentally trigger NPCs and need to reset them. To turn the NPC on, we simply have to add the correct tag. It's called Echo Active, and it applies to any entity with proximity sensors. Boom! The first state is now triggered by proximity. The following states can still be clicked through like normal. There's more we can do with transitions. Let's try some out. So I've added another transition definition. However, this time, instead of pointing to a single state, I'm actually pointing to a range of states. So this will add the timer transition type to states 2 through state's end, which in this case is state 4. So I'm back in world. I've summoned the entity and already tagged it as active. So the first state is going to transition when we get within 5 blocks. The next states in the top grouping are going to transition based on a very fast timer. Let's see what that looks like. So just to be clear, I wasn't clicking on the entity. Those states happened purely based on a timer. Alright, I think that's as far as I'm going to go tonight. So to recap, you can attach components, transition types, and commands to arbitrary substates of these dialog groupings. I didn't even get to attaching component groups, but it's possible with a very similar format. By splitting your dialog out into distinct states, and then handling the chat dialog, the transitions, the commands, and components separately, you're able to gain maximum control while still very easily creating the simple case, which is an NPC that just says dialogue. Hopefully this was interesting to you. You can always reach me on Discord, linked in the description.